What's up guys, Reframe here and welcome back to a new video. If you're new to this channel, there's one thing you need to know. I'm Reframe and I shoot videos with the Canon M50, the Canon 90D and the Canon EOS R. I'll make tutorials, reviews, vlogs, a lot of things. If you subscribe to my channel, don't forget to activate the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of my future videos. What do we talk about today? We talk about full frame and crop sensor cameras. What about them? One thing in the specific, or two, yeah. Everybody knows, or everybody thinks, that a full-frame sensor can capture more light and give us the possibility to control the field of view better, like producing a more shallow depth of field compared to a crop sensor camera. But let's start with the first statement, that a full-frame camera lets more light in compared to a crop sensor camera, because of its larger sensor. That makes totally sense, right? Right. But let's see this with my two cameras. One, which is filming right now, the Canon EOS R full frame, and this, the Canon 90D, a crop sensor camera, which crops the image times 1.6. When we shoot with this, the image is cropped. So let's say when we shoot with a 50mm, we actually get the field of view of an 80mm, or something like that. For this comparison / demonstration, I'm gonna use the same lens on both cameras, the EF 50mm f1.8, the Nifty 50. So, what do you think about it? Leave a comment down below and let me know, and check the links in the description to see all my gear stuff and things. My gear. And check the link to Epidemic Sound, and you can get 1 month of awesome music and great sound effects for 1 month for free. Just check it out. Let me know what you think of the clips you have seen. Is there more light? Both with the Canon EOS R and the Canon 90D, I shot with exactly the same settings, the same lens, same everything. Was there more light? Down here in the comments. Now, after seeing and judging whether we get more light with the EOS R full frame than with the 90D crop sensor camera, we move to the second statement. With a full frame camera, we can get a more shallow depth of field, if we so desire. But is that true? Let's see it. But before showing you the clips, I'd like to explain a little bit to you what's the depth of field. What is it? When you focus on the subject, the space in focus behind and in front of the subject, that's the depth of field. The deeper the depth of field, the more the amount of space in front and behind the subject will be completely in focus. The narrower the depth of field, the less would be the space in front and behind the subject that would be in focus. How can we control that? There are three factors, like the aperture, the space between the subject and the camera in the background, and the focal length, or the lens that we use. So, for what concerns the aperture, well, I made a video about it, like camera basics for video. Here, there is a card here, I guess. The aperture of a lens is measured in f-stops. The higher the value of the f, the deeper the depth of field. The lower the f value, the narrower the depth of field. Therefore, when we use a lens and we set the aperture to f8, f16, f22, we get almost everything in focus. Or we don't get any shallow depth of field, no blurry background. The lower the f value, like f2.8, f2, f1.8, the narrower will be the depth of field, meaning that the space in focus in front and behind the subject will not be much. In this case, we're more likely to get a blurry background with a shallow depth of field. So to get a blurry background, the ideal is to shoot at an aperture of f2, f1.8, f1.4, even f1.2. The second factor is the distance between the subject and the camera and the background. It's easier to get a shallow depth of field, a narrower depth of field, when the subject is as close as possible to the camera. And also the opposite is true. The farther from the camera the subject, the less the background is likely to be blurred. Then there's a third factor that determines the degree of blur of the shallow depth of field, of the depth of field anyway, and it's the compression of the lens, so the focal length. When we use a wide angle, we don't get any compression or not much. So if we use a wide angle lens like a 16 or a 15 or 14 millimeters, even with a wide aperture, we don't get a very shallow depth of field, sometimes not at all. But when we shoot with a 35, 50 millimeters, we can get some pretty good shallow depth of field. The ideal, for example, is 85. A very commonly used lens for portraits is the 85 millimeters. So the wider the lens, the deeper the depth of field. With a telelens like 85, 100, 135 or more, there's so much compression that we can get the shallow depth of field even at f4. In order to obtain the result that we want, we need to combine these three factors: the aperture of the lens, the distance of the subject from the camera in the background, and the compression of the lens, the focal length. Now let's see what happens when we shoot with the same lens on the Canon EOS R full frame and on the Canon 90D crop sensor camera, keeping the subject, me, at the same distance from the camera and the background, and let's see if we get the same level of blurriness in the background. Okay, so what do you think about it? Again, leave a comment down below, just let me know, and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button. So, if you think that the clips shot with the EOS R have a better shallow depth of field, blurry background than the Canon 90D, just let me know. Or if you think the opposite, what you're seeing with the EOS R is a 50 millimeters on a full frame, so 50 millimeters. On the Canon 90D, which is a crop sensor camera, the image is cropped, so it looks like an 85 millimeters. That means that what we have in frame, it looks like if the lens was an 85 millimeters, but we don't get the same compression of the 80 or 85 millimeters. First of all, because we're still shooting with a 50 millimeters. It's just cropped, like same image that we get on full frame, just cropped. And second reason why we don't get any extra shallow depth of field, besides the fact that we're using the same lens. Yes, it's the same lens that I used with the EOS R, even though the image is cropped, at the same distance from the subject and the background. But I want to hear from you again, I want to know your opinion. Now I'm going to show you what happens if I reframe the image to make the footage of the Canon 90D with the same field of view of the clip shot with the EOS R. Check it out. So what's the difference? I bet you notice that there is less blur in the background. Why? Because even though the settings are the same, just like the previous clip, the aperture, the ISO, everything is the same. But one thing that I changed to make it look like the same field of view, I have to move the camera farther from me, from the subject. Therefore, according to the principles I told you earlier, when there is more distance between the camera and the subject, we get a deeper depth of field, less blur in the background. Alright, so to answer the question, full frame versus crop sensor cameras. Do we get more light? What do you think? You saw the samples. And do we get more blur in the background? You saw it? You judge. Alright, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.